All right, next we're going to get into income planning. So we're going to show how Social Security relates to income planning, and then finally we'll get to taxation. So this is where I like to jump into kind of the phases of the wealth cycle. So congratulations on getting here. You know, you're looking at the doorstep of retirement. You've been working your way up the mountain. So this is what we call the accumulation phase. You've been saving and putting money away for the retirement. But the little known fact is more people die on Mount Everest on the way down, not on the way up. So in this situation also, the distribution phase can get a little bit more difficult than the accumulation phase. So from the accumulation phase, a lot of people use a 401k. It's easy, so they just automatically take money out of your check. Sometimes your employer is matching that. It makes it nice and easy to save for retirement. Dollar cost averaging. So as the market goes up and down, you've probably been told before that, hey, when the market's down, everything's on sale. So stay the course, keep investing through all those ups and downs, because mathematically it does help you out. So all of that volatility in the market just helps you buy at a lower price point, and then in the end will actually make you more money by having some of that volatility. And last but not least, we've been in a record bull market since 2009. That's still going on to this day, and I've got a slide, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But these are some of the tailwinds in the way that it's been made easy for you on this accumulation phase. So in the distribution phase, where arguably it gets more difficult, now we got to be thinking about income and retirement. So how are we going to actually produce income off of that portfolio that we've been saving over time? Sequence of return risk is the exact opposite of dollar cost averaging. So once we start taking withdrawals in retirement, and we have that volatility, each time we go down in one of those dips and you're withdrawing money, you're essentially locking in a loss. So it's the exact opposite of dollar cost averaging, where the sequence of return risk can actually hurt portfolios and run your portfolio down faster. And then last, hedging interest rates, inflation. So I know that's been in a topic in the news recently, but we've had some record runs on inflation. Interest rates have been a hot topic with the Fed, so there's a lot going on there, and a lot for those that are retired, especially if you're on a fixed income. And last but not least is legacy planning. So until this point, most people haven't really spent too much time worrying about legacy planning, but at some point you're going to pass away and someone's going to inherit your assets. So jumping into some of that planning, it's a good time to be looking at doing that when it's something you really haven't had on your plate before. All right, as I talk about the best bull run ever, so this is a whole bunch of iterations of 15-year time periods going back to 1970. And you can see in that dark blue line that this is the trajectory we're on now. And this slide is actually through 2024. So from when this was printed till now, the market is up even more. And what's pretty concerning about it is, this quote over here has, returns have been more than double the average. So if we look at all these time frames, that record bull run from 2009 till now has produced some extraordinary returns. And those are at our back. Those are great. They've got us where we're at. It has your account balance higher than it's probably ever been. But then the question is, if that's what's happened in the past, where are we going in the future? So when we look at this record run right here, we've got some numbers up here that it's going over the S&P 500 over the last 20 years, 25 years. And what we're looking at is that it's averaged a really high rate of return. And so if we even go back to the bottom of the 2022 market, the market's averaged 6.42% return. And if we go to the end of 23, the market averaged 7% rate of return. So with that average, you would think, well, if I average 6 or 7%, can I take 6 or 7% off my portfolio, keep the principal the same, and live a great retirement? And the answer is not quite. This next exercise, we're going to go through that sequence of return risk that I discussed. So we're actually going to put some numbers to it and give you an example. So in this hypothetical, we're going to take 20 years, and we're going to start with an IRA of $500,000, and then we're going to do a withdrawal of $30,000 a year. So that's 6%. So we're going to withdraw 6% off this, and we're going to run through the market for 20 years and see what happens. And we're going to use 2000 through 2019. And so when we run these numbers out, you can see that down at year 17, this plan actually runs out of money. And it does that for a couple reasons. So over those 20 years, we've had some pretty big market dips. So really starting in 2000, we had the dot-com bubble burst. So in the first few years right out of the gate, there were some pretty big negative returns. And then this person was withdrawing $30,000 off of their portfolio. So not only were they selling at a discount, they were taking a pretty sizable chunk of money every year off the portfolio. And this is the sequence of returns that happened to be 2000 to 2019. So for comparison, to show you that sequence matters, I'm going to take the same exact numbers, and then we're just going to flip it over. We're going to invert it. So we're going to go backwards from 2019 to 2000. And when we do that, and we're taking the same amount off of the same number, you can see down in year 20, they're left with $1.9 million. So in one example of withdrawing $30,000 per year, they ran out of money by year 17. And if we take those same returns and just scramble them in a different sequence, and the next one, they didn't run out of money, but they've got more money than they started with while taking $30,000 a year. So this is basically an example to just show you that that sequence of those returns, not necessarily the return itself, makes a big difference when you're withdrawing and taking money out of the portfolio. Okay? So next I'd like to go over where does the money actually come from in retirement. So a lot of times I like to talk about buckets of money. So you might have money in a Roth or an IRA, or you might have a brokerage. But where does that money come from in retirement? And then how does that affect, in the end, taxation? So in this example, we've got $34,000 a year coming in from Social Security. And then this couple has saved $250,000 in a Roth IRA. And then they have $750,000 in a traditional IRA. And then their goal here at the bottom is $92,000 a year in income, okay? So in the first example I'm going to run is that they're going to take the additional money that they need above and beyond Social Security, and they're going to take that out of the IRA. Well, the IRA is taxable. They're going to get their gross income of the $92,000, but then they're going to be in that 85% taxable on their Social Security, right? So based on the provisional income calculation we went through, they're going to be in that 85% bracket. So when it comes down to the net income, they're going to net $85,000, not the $92,000 that they took out of their investments, okay? So the next year they're like, well, we've got that Roth thingy over there. So let's use that Roth because we're going to get some tax-free income out of that. And so in this example, they switch over and they take the $58,000 out of the Roth IRA. And they still net the $92,000, or they gross the $92,000. And then in this example, they net the $92,000 because that additional Roth income wasn't taxed and then didn't affect the taxation of Social Security. So they got to be in the 0% bracket on that. So what's the problem with this scenario for this couple? Well, we just took $58,000 out and they only had $250,000 total in the Roth. So that was a pretty heavy withdrawal out of that account, and they're essentially going to run it to zero pretty quick. So then they think, aha, I'm going to split the baby, right? We're going to do half out of the Roth and half out of the IRA. And as you can see, the percent of tax on Social Security is now 22.6, so they're not being taxed as heavily on Social Security. They're going to net $91,000, so pretty close to the $92,000 they wanted to. And this is a little easier way from a tax perspective to get their income. Now, this isn't what I'm suggesting, and doing pro rata like this rarely works in your benefit, but it's just an example of, and I put my gears over here to remind me to talk about, in this situation when you get to retirement and you have Social Security and it can be taxable or there can be a clawback, there's a lot of moving parts. And so knowing when you move one thing over here, it's going to move 2 or 3 things over here. So using programs, we can go in and run scenarios of what does it mean if we adjust this number, adjust that number, and kind of monitor the overall output to make sure that we're moving in the right direction or we're doing the most tax advantage, income advantage withdrawal sequence for you. So this is just an example of kind of how it all works together, and that there's a balance between withdrawing from different types of accounts. All right, no one's fallen asleep yet. Nice. We're going to go ahead and get on to taxation.